In this video, I will talk briefly about audience, purpose, style, and tone, and how they relate to writing in general, and more specifically to college courses. When we talk about these terms in regards to writing, audience refers to your readers, purpose refers to the reason you're writing something, style refers to the way you write something, and then tone refers to your feelings or your attitudes or emotions regarding the topic that you're writing about. When we think about audience, and then these other pieces, purpose, style, and tone, we want to remember that they all tie together. So first, it's important to determine your purpose for writing, and then based on that purpose, determine your audience. And then based on your audience, you will use a certain style or tone. So again, it all ties together. And we'll talk more about these individually. So some general notes about audience. I know sometimes, and this kind of ties in with style as well, you're told to not write like you speak. But in this class, I would much prefer that you are authentic and you're genuine and you do write like you speak. I think your audience can tell if you're not being sincere or you're trying to write in a voice or a way that really is not true to yourself. For point number 2, it's important to always research topics before writing about them to ensure that you're providing accurate information about topics. So you want to make sure that you're informed when you convey this information to your audience. Kind of getting back to what I already talked about in point number 3, please don't feel like you need to replace your own words with words that you would not normally use, like going to a thesaurus and then replacing what you would normally say with a bunch of words that you wouldn't normally use. It's better to just write from your own experiences and how you would write, like if you were speaking with somebody that you know. And then to keep in mind that you're writing for a public audience, so you want to use inclusive language, and I talk more about that later. But in general, to be mindful that other people reading your essays have different life experiences and values. So just kind of not making assumptions about those things. Some common purposes in writing and in some of the college courses that you might be taking in the future are to inform, which is to provide facts and information about a topic or a subject, to analyze, where you examine methodically and in detail, and you interpret a topic or an idea presented, usually in response to sometimes a specific piece of writing. To persuade is to convince an audience to accept an opinion about a topic. To entertain is to be funny, to amuse your audience, and usually this happens through the use of humor. To propose is to put forward a plan or a suggestion for consideration. And then to summarize is to briefly state key points. So these are some of the common purposes in writing. And a little bit more about audience and purpose and making those connections. For our course, our college composition class, your classmates, and then in general for most of your college courses you'll take, your classmates and your professors will be your audience. Sometimes, however, in other classes you may have a different audience, so it's always important to establish who you're writing for in your different classes and for different writing assignments. So in different disciplines, in college courses, there may be different guidelines and styles that are specific to particular audiences. For example, you may be asked to write things like a personal narrative, which we're doing in our first essay in this class. In that case, the audience or maybe the style might differ from a proposal or an argument, because in a personal narrative, you're just writing about yourself and your own experiences. You could perhaps be asked to write a lab report, to summarize something, write an incident report. It may be if you're a fire science major. My husband recently retired as a firefighter, and he was a captain for many years, and he wrote many incident reports. So, you know, just because English 100 is a class that you're required to take, it doesn't kind of exist in a bubble depending on what career field you get into. Almost all career fields involve some kind of writing. So just thinking about when you are out of college and maybe asked to do writing, going back to audience and purpose. Why are you writing something? Who is your audience? In the incident report, for example, as a first responder, you would be writing for other people who are also in the medical field, so the terminology you use would be understood by those people. You wouldn't have to take time to explain those terms, and you would be very specific. You wouldn't want to be general like you would be in a summary. So just a few brief examples about audience and purpose. For tone and style, in college courses, typically you're expected to write using academic language. I just want to make a note that although this is typically the expectation, academic language is not superior or better than any other type of language. There is no inherent standard of correct English. And in my classes, diverse languages and dialects are welcome. However, like I mentioned, because this class prepares you for other college courses that may require academic language and discourse that's used in United States colleges, I'm going to go over some of those general guidelines that are related to academic language and discourse. So typically, the tone and the style in academic language is objective. That's what we're aiming for. An objective tone is something that's impartial and attempts to not be judgmental or emotive. So keeping your emotions out of your writing as much as possible, even though I think it's nearly impossible to be completely objective. But the goal for this type of writing is to try as best you can to be impartial. So you would try to write in a way where you are presenting clear and accurate facts and evidence and ideas, rather than your personal opinions or judgments about this information. You want to present an argument based around evidence, so something that's factual and supported by ideas. You want to avoid exaggeration and bias. Typically, this type of language avoids first-person pronoun or points of view, so using pronouns like I, me, my, or mine. There are exceptions, of course, to this, especially like if you're writing a research paper and you're writing about lived experiences within that paper. And then showing respect for the views of others and allowing room for others to disagree. Also, with this tone or the style, you would want to avoid making 100% statements, such as saying things like something is always one way or never one way, or everyone agrees with something, because that's rarely the case. And a little bit more about tone. In academic language, again, we're going for that objective tone. So we think about connotation and denotation to help us be objective in our writing. Connotation refers to the literal dictionary definition of a word. So there really aren't any feelings or negative or positive associations with the word, whereas denotation goes beyond the literal dictionary definition to suggest positive and negative emotions. Some examples include these pairs of words. So loneliness and independence. Loneliness tends to have a negative connotation where independence has a positive connotation. tolerant and pushover. Again, tolerant would be a positive connotation, pushover a negative connotation. And then direct and rude. Direct in this case sounds positive, whereas rude sounds negative. So just being aware of your word choice and any tone or emotions that might be associated with specific words when you are trying to write in an objective voice. And then in terms of style, there are many different types of styles in writing. Style again refers to the way you write something, and again, depending on your purpose and your audience, you will use different styles. Part of deciding what type of style to use involves word choice. So like I was just talking about, emotive words, connotation and denotation, sentence fluency, how much of your voice you actually include in your writing. These all contribute to the type of style in a piece of writing. And just a note that there isn't any superior or better style. It, again, just depends on your purpose for writing something and then the audience that you are trying to reach. And a little bit more about writing styles. Again, in an academic setting, typically you're asked to use academic language, which is more formal than other styles. So when we talk about that, we are thinking about our topics that are related to specific fields of study. Our audience is informed, so we don't have to spend a great deal of time providing, for example, background information. And then typically the point of view is third person, so he, she, it, they, them, mostly avoiding first and second person points of view, again with an objective, impersonal tone or vocabulary choice. And a little bit more about academic language. For colleges like the one we're attending, you're expected to use standard American grammar, typically with formal documentation. In our course, we use MLA, Modern Language Association, but there are other types of or ways to document information, such as Chicago Turabian, APA, and so forth. Typically, you're expected to write out contractions, so instead of writing something like can't, you would write cannot. Typically, you're asked to not use regional language, and then you would write out numbers under 100. You would write the word out. And regardless of our purpose and our audience, we should always use inclusive language. So this is a language that acknowledges diversity, conveys respect to all people, and is sensitive to differences and promotes equal opportunities. So we want to be mindful to be gender inclusive and to think about racial, ethnic, and tribal identity. And in this case, or these examples, it's best to just ask people, what are your pronouns, for example, and then in terms of racial, ethnic, and tribal identity, how do they want to be referred to? So I think that's always the best option, is to just ask somebody. And that concludes this presentation. If you have any questions about any of this information, please let me know. Thank you.